Montana Territory, July 1883, the sky stretched wide and blue over the high plains. But what caught Abram Zeller's eye was not the horizon, it was the figure slumped on the dusty wagon trail. White dress torn at the hem, veil tangled in her dark hair like a ghost left behind. He pulled his gelding to a halt. What in God's name? The woman didn't move. Abram dismounted fast, boots hitting hard-packed earth. He crouched beside her, pressing 2 fingers gently to her neck, a pulse steady but faint. Her skin was sunburnt, lips cracked. The dry heat had been ruthless all week. "Miss," he said, voice low but firm. "Can you hear me?" She stirred, a whisper escaping. "He left me." Her eyes fluttered open, bright hazel, full of confusion and fear. Her face was smudged with dust, but even through the grime she was beautiful, delicate features, proud chin, something fierce behind her exhaustion. "He left me," she repeated, almost like she didn't believe it herself. "Right here." Abram scanned the empty trail. No wagon, no tracks heading east or west, just her and the wide stretch of nothing. "Who left you?" he asked, already shrugging out of his coat. "My fiancé." Her voice cracked. "We were headed to Fort Benton. He said he needed to water the horses." "Then he never came back." Abram wrapped the coat carefully around her shoulders. "You walked far," she shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I waited, then I fell, I do not know how long ago." "Can you stand?" she tried, legs buckling. Abram caught her, arms strong around her waist. She was light, trembling. He lifted her without thinking. "I am taking you to my ranch," he said. "It is closer than any town." "No," she whispered. "I cannot impose, you are not. You were left to die." "I do not let people die." He set her gently on the saddle, then climbed up behind her, holding her steady as they turned toward the hills. "I am Abram Zeller," he said after a quiet moment. "And you?" She hesitated. "Celia Sutton." "Well, Miss Sutton," he said, guiding the horse into a steady trot, "you are safe now." His ranch sat low in the valley, tucked between the cottonwoods and a winding creek. The house was wide and clean, with a wraparound porch and red shutters. Abram had built it himself 5 years earlier, after inheriting land and cattle from his father. He had money, but he preferred work over society. He had not wanted a wife, not until now, not until this girl with fire in her eyes and a wedding dress torn by betrayal. Celia slept through the ride, head resting against his chest. She stirred when he lifted her down, her fingers curling into his shirt. "I will get you inside," he said gently. The housekeeper, an older woman named Mabel, opened the door with a gasp. "Lord above, Abram." "What happened?" "Abandoned on the road," he said shortly. "We need water, broth, and bandages." Mabel nodded and vanished into the kitchen. Celia was too weak to protest when he brought her into the guest room. He laid her on the bed and turned to leave, but her fingers brushed his wrist. "Thank you." Her voice was soft but sincere. He nodded once. "Rest. We will talk when you are stronger." By morning she was sitting up, sipping broth with both hands wrapped around the cup. The sun streamed through the window, catching the gold in her hair. Abram leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. She looked at him, wary but calm. "You are a good man." "I am just a man who saw someone in need." She gave a small smile. "That is rare." He moved into the room slowly, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "What happened, Celia?" She stared into her cup. "My parents are gone. I was living with an aunt in St. Louis. She arranged the match. He was a merchant, headed west to open a trading post. He was charming at first, but the closer we got to Montana, the more I saw who he truly was." Abram stayed quiet. Her voice was steady now, but her hands trembled. "He did not want a wife. He wanted someone quiet, someone who would not ask questions. When I did, he started ignoring me. Then yesterday, he said he needed to check the horses, and he never came back." Abram's jaw tightened. "He will not hurt you again." "I do not even want revenge," she said. "I just want to feel like I matter." "You do," he said without hesitation. She blinked, surprised by his certainty. "I know what it is to be alone," he added. "My mother died when I was 12. My father was kind but distant. I built this place with my own 2 hands. Sometimes I think I did it just to prove I could." Her eyes softened. You have done more than prove it." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt full, not empty. Over the next week, Celia healed. She traded her ruined dress for a soft cotton gown Mabel found in storage. She explored the porch in the mornings, helped in the kitchen when she could. And every evening, Abram came home from tending the herd and found her there, waiting. They talked. About books, about the land, about loneliness. One night, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she stood barefoot on the porch, watching the light fade. Abram stepped up beside her. "I feel like I should be angry," she said quietly, "but I am not. I feel lighter somehow. You are free now." She turned to him, expression raw. "Why are you being so kind to me?" He looked at her, really looked. "Because the moment I saw you on that road, something in me changed. I have money, land, a name, but I never had hope. Not until I found you." Her breath caught. "I do not know what comes next," he said, "but I would like to find out with you." Celia's eyes filled, not with sorrow this time, but with something warm. She reached for his hand. "I would like that too." And for the first time in years, Abram Zeller smiled like a man who had finally come home. The wind shifted in the valley, bringing cooler air down from the mountains, and with it the scent of pine and river water. Celia stood by the garden fence, her fingers brushing along the tops of the dill and sorrel, breathing in the green. A week had passed since Abram found her, and though her body had steadied, something inside still hovered between weightless and unmoored. She turned at the sound of boots on packed dirt. "You walk light for a man your size," she said, not needing to look up. "You stand quiet for someone who once fainted mid-road," Abram replied, stopping beside her. Celia smiled faintly, eyes still on the garden. "You grow herbs?" she asked. "They make the meals taste like more than salt and smoke," he said. "Mabel's the one with the touch, though. I just dig the rose." Celia reached for a stem of thyme. "In St. Louis, my aunt liked to say a woman's hands belonged in flower or folded." Abram watched her fingers move, careful and sure. "And what do you say?" "I say hands were made for work. Doesn't much matter what kind," he nodded, resting his arms on the fence rail. "You ever plant anything?" "No, but I used to help the neighbor lady with her rose vines. She said I had a way with things that needed coaxing." "You do?" She glanced at him then, uncertain whether he meant it as praise or something else. His face was calm, but his eyes held a steady fire she was beginning to know. "You work every day?" she asked. "Cattle don't rest," he said. "I rotate the herd through the north pasture this time of year. Creek runs stronger up there." "Could I ride with you tomorrow?" she asked before she could decide not to. He looked at her a long moment. "You ride?" "I wasn't raised in a parlor." "That wasn't the question." "I do," she said. "Side saddle usually, but I prefer not to." "We ride proper out here. I'll saddle the dun mare for you. She's steady." Celia nodded. "Thank you." Abram turned to go but paused. "You sleep all right last night?" "I dreamed of falling," she said. "Then I woke and remembered I hadn't." He gave a short nod. "If you ever want to ride just to ride, not for cattle, you say so." "I will." He left her then, and she turned back to the garden, the thyme sprig still in her hand. The wind stirred her skirts, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she was being carried away by it. The sun had barely cleared the ridge when they set out. The dun mare moved with the calm, swaying gait of a mountain-trained horse, and Celia sat astride with her skirts pinned for riding. Abram led the way, his hat low against the light, trailing a path through tall grass and shadowed scrub. They passed a grove where the cottonwoods leaned toward the creek, and beyond that the land opened wide, dotted with cattle that moved like slow ink across the hills. "You ride easy," Abram said over his shoulder. "I had an old gelding once, back before my parents passed. I used to sneak him oats and read beside the barn." "Read him what?" "Whatever I could find, mostly sermons and dry histories." "No wonder he was calm," she laughed, the sound surprising both of them. They reached the rise, and Abram dismounted to check a fence line. Celia stayed in the saddle, watching the herd. One calf wandered close, bleating for its mother, who turned at once and nuzzled it. "Do you name them?" she asked. "Not the ones I plan to sell." "And the ones you don't?" He looked up from the wire. You thinking of naming one? She tilted her head. Maybe, he smiled but didn't press. Instead, he stood and dusted his hands. Come walk a bit. The ground's dry. They tied the horses and walked along the ridge, boots crunching over sun-baked grass. The air smelled of dust and sage. I used to think I'd live in a city, she said. With gas lamps and a view of a river, you still could. I don't want to. They stopped near a boulder where the land dropped away, revealing the wide basin below. A hawk circled high above. I want something real, she said, not polished. Not arranged. He looked at her, the wind brushing his collar back. You think this place is that? I think you are. He folded his arms. I've done things I'm not proud of. So have I, she said, but I'm not looking for perfect. What are you looking for? She met his eyes. Someone who won't vanish when my back's turned. He stepped closer, slow. I don't walk away once I've made a choice, he said. You should know that. I do. She reached for his hand without thinking, their fingers finding each other like roots in dry ground. They stood like that a long time, the breeze playing between them, the hawk wheeling silent above. Neither spoke again until the sun climbed higher and the cattle began to stir. They rode back side by side. The first rain came in late July, soft and steady, washing the dust from the porch boards and leaving the air thick with the scent of wet earth. Celia watched the drops trace down the window glass, her sewing forgotten in her lap. She wasn't used to stillness that didn't ache. Down in the barn, Abram was oiling saddle leather. She'd seen him carry the bridle in earlier, his shirt damp at the collar. He hadn't said much that morning, but he'd touched her shoulder lightly when he passed, and the warmth of it had stayed long after. She set aside the needlework and reached for her shawl. In the barn, the light was dim, lanterns swinging gently from a beam. Abram looked up from the saddle, his knuckles dark with oil and effort. You're restless, he said. There's a silence in the house when it rains. I wanted out of it, he nodded. You mind the smell? I like it, she said. Smells like something honest. He wiped his hands on a rag, then hung the saddle over its stand. You ever lived through a prairie winter? No, she said. Is it hard? It's long, isolating. Wind doesn't quit for weeks sometimes. She stepped closer, fingers grazing the edge of the workbench. You live alone through it, 4 winters now, her voice softened. You don't have to this time. He looked at her, slow and searching. You sure? I'm not asking to be kept, she said. But I'd like to belong somewhere that doesn't vanish when the weather turns. He leaned back against the post, arms crossed. I've known women who came west thinking it was all open skies and fresh starts. Most of them left. I'm not most women. His gaze didn't waver. No, you're not. She stepped closer, the rain pattering louder on the tin roof. I don't want to be someone's duty, Abram. You're not. Then what am I? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for her hand, rough fingers curling around her smaller ones. You're the first thing that's felt right in a long time, he said. I didn't expect you, but I'm not about to let you drift out of reach. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I want to build something, she said. Not just live in the corners of someone else's life. You wouldn't be, not here. The lantern light flickered across the beams, wind rising outside. She leaned into him, the space between them closing without effort. I can cook, she said. And I mend fast. I've tasted your biscuits, he said. I wouldn't call that a boast, she laughed, low and warm against his chest. I can learn, she said, so can I. He brushed his thumb over the back of her hand. You want to marry me, Celia? She lifted her eyes to his. Yes, a beat passed, then another. I'll ride to the judge in Townsend tomorrow, he said. We can have it done proper. She nodded once. I want a quiet ceremony. He tilted his head. You already had the dress. I don't want anything from before, she said. Let it all stay behind me on that road. Abram's jaw tightened. Then we start fresh, you and me. She rested her forehead against his collarbone. That's all I want. Outside, the rain eased into a hush and the lantern swung slower. The barn held the smell of cedar and leather, and the beginning of something neither of them had expected but both had chosen now without fear. The sky was pale with dawn when Abram stepped down from the porch, saddlebag over his shoulder. He paused at the gate, glancing once toward the house. A curtain shifted upstairs, faint and quick, and he knew she was already awake. She hadn't said much the night before, just pressed her hand to his chest before turning in. That was enough. The ride to Townsend took most of the day, the trail damp from the last rain but firm underfoot. He kept a steady pace, mind turned over with thoughts that didn't settle. He'd lived years without wishing for more than the land and a quiet bed. But now he found himself picturing things: Celia's hand in his come winter, her voice filling the silence of supper, the feel of her beside him when the wind blew hard against the walls. At the courthouse, he signed the petition for marriage in a room that smelled of ink and old pine. The judge, a narrow-shouldered man with white fuzz on his chin, nodded without fanfare. "You'll want a witness," the judge said, thumbing through a ledger. "I'll bring one," Abram replied. The judge scratched a date onto the paper. 3 days from now. "That suit you?" "It does." He rode home with the sun on his back, the town's dust clinging to his boots. When he reached the rise above the valley, he saw her out behind the barn, sleeves rolled past her elbows, coaxing a stubborn hen into its coop with a length of broom grass. She looked up when he rode in, sunlight catching the curve of her cheek. "You went and came back quicker than I expected," she said as he dismounted. "I figured you'd rather not wait long." She leaned against the fence, arms crossed. "Was it all in order? Got the license?" "We marry in 3 days." 3 days, she repeated, like tasting the words. He watched her a moment. "You still want this?" She didn't hesitate. "I do." That night she stayed out on the porch until the stars came out, her feet tucked under her, a shawl draped loose over her shoulders. Abram stepped out, rubbing the back of his neck. "You need anything?" She shook her head. "I was thinking about my mother." He sat beside her, careful not to crowd her space. She had a laugh that could stop a room, but she was restless. "She used to say she'd have gone west if she hadn't married young." Celia turned to him. "She'd have liked you." "That mean you think I'm simple or steady?" "Both," she said. "In the best way." He nodded once. "My mother used to sing while she baked, not full songs, just scraps. I never heard the end of any of them." Celia smiled faintly. "Maybe we can finish one together." He reached over and covered her hand with his. "I'd like that." The porch creaked beneath them as the breeze shifted. Neither moved to go inside. 2 days later, Mabel took down the white curtains from the parlor and pressed them with hot stones. Celia stood barefoot in the kitchen, sewing a ribbon into the waist of a modest blue dress she'd found in a trunk. She didn't want lace or fuss. She wanted something that would last through weather and work. Abram cleaned the tool shed, lined the shelves, and mended the back gate. It wasn't the ceremony he prepared for, it was the life that would follow. On the morning of the wedding, the sky turned the color of new cream. Celia stood in the doorway, dress falling soft around her hips, hair tied back with a strip of linen. Abram waited by the hitching post, coat brushed, collar straight. "You ready?" he asked. She stepped down the porch steps and met his gaze. "I've been ready since the day you didn't look away." They rode to Townsend with Mabel in the back of the wagon, a basket of bread and preserves tucked beside her. The judge stood waiting in the small chapel, the sun slanting through the windows. Abram took her hand, calloused fingers curling around hers with quiet certainty. When the words were spoken and the papers signed, they did not kiss with flourish or fanfare. He simply leaned down and she lifted her chin, and they found each other the way they had all along, steady, sure, and without fear. On the ride home, she rested her head against his shoulder. "What now?" she asked. He didn't miss a beat. "We build." And for the first time in her life, she believed the ground beneath her would hold. The wind carried the scent of cooling earth through the open windows of the house. Late August had brought a turning in the air, still warm by day, but edged with a whisper of frost come morning. Celia sat at the small desk in the front room, carefully copying a list of items for the fall order: coffee, lamp oil, muslin, new hinges for the barn door. Abram had handed her the ledger with a quiet, practical trust, and she had taken to managing it with surprising ease. Behind her, the floor creaked as he stepped into the room with his hair still damp from the wash basin. "You write like someone who's been keeping books her whole life," he said, drying his hands on a cloth. "I used to help the church treasurer back home," she replied, dipping her pen again. "Figures make more sense than people most days." He came to stand by her shoulder. "You'll need to add fence nails. I found the western line sagging this morning." She made the note without pause. "Anything else?" He leaned on the desk, studying her script. "Maybe cinnamon if there's coin left." She raised an eyebrow. "You don't strike me as someone with a sweet tooth." "I don't," he said. "But you do." She glanced up, surprised. "You notice that?" His mouth pulled into a quiet curve. "I notice everything about you." She set the pen down slowly. "Will you always?" "Long as I draw breath." That night, they sat together at the table eating boiled potatoes and greens with thick slices of smoked ham. The room was lit by a single oil lamp, and the air between them had taken on a new kind of hush, one not born of uncertainty, but of belonging. After supper, she pulled a folded sheet of paper from the drawer. "I started a letter," she said. "To my aunt. I thought she should know where I've landed." He nodded once, chewing slowly. "You want her to visit?" "I don't know if she'd want to." "But I don't want her thinking I've vanished." He gestured to the paper. "Read me what you've got." Celia hesitated, then unfolded it and began. "Dear Aunt Ruth, you may be surprised to hear from me, but I write with a steady hand and a full heart. I'm married now and safe. The man I wed is not someone I expected, but he is someone I chose, and I've never doubted that choice, not once." She stopped, eyes lifting to meet his. "That's as far as I got." "It's enough," he said. The following week, they rode to the north edge of the property where the creek forked around a stand of birch. The land there had gone to seed, overgrown and tangled, but the soil was dark and rich underfoot. Abram dismounted and ran a hand through the tall grass. "This spot's always been good for planting," he said. "Never got around to it." Celia walked a few paces, then turned. "We could try winter wheat. It holds through the cold." He looked at her, a trace of surprise in his face. "You want to farm this patch? I want to build something with you." "Something that roots," he nodded slowly. "Then we'll seed it next week, together." That night they lay under the quilt with the windows open, stars flickering over the hills. Celia turned to face him in the dark. "Do you ever wonder if you'd have found us if I hadn't been left on that road?" His hand found hers beneath the blanket. "I don't wonder, I know." "How?" "I think some things don't pass you by, no matter how long the road is." She pressed her forehead to his. "I'm not afraid of the wind anymore." "Good," he whispered. "It's not strong enough to carry you off now." In October, they broke ground near the creek. The soil turned easy under their hands, and Abram built a small shed nearby with room for tools and seed. Celia kept a journal of their progress in a leather-bound ledger she'd found in the back of the pantry, recording each step with deliberate care. By November, the wheat was in, and the shed was stocked. The evenings grew colder, and they took to sitting close by the hearth, her mending in her lap, his boots drying by the fire. They spoke less now, but with more meaning. She would look up from her stitching and find him watching her, not with hunger but with reverence. One evening, as sleet tapped against the roof, she laid her sewing aside. "I've been thinking," she said. "Come spring, we could offer lodging to travelers, fix up the old bunkhouse." He looked up from whittling a length of hickory. "You want more people wandering through?" "I want to be part of something larger than just surviving." He considered that, then nodded. "We'll start repairs after thaw." The days shortened, and snow came in soft layers. Celia learned to split logs and bank the stove, to salt meat and mend reins. Abram showed her how to read the sky for storms, how to listen for the change in the herd's movement. They moved through each day with the quiet rhythm of two who had chosen to stay. In the first days of March, the wheat sprouted pale green, soft as breath against the thawing earth. Celia knelt beside the rows, fingers brushing the shoots. Abram came up behind her, offering a hand to help her stand. "They're fragile," she said. "We'll keep them strong." They walked back to the house at a slow pace, boots sinking slightly into damp soil. The sun was warm on their backs and birds trilled from the maples near the porch. Inside, Mabel stirred stew in the kitchen, humming under her breath. She'd stayed on after the wedding, not out of duty, but because she said the house felt different now, like it was worth staying in. That night, Abram placed a wrapped parcel in Celia's lap. She opened it to find a pair of leather gloves lined with wool and stitched by hand. "So your fingers don't freeze next planting," he said. She touched the seams with care. "These'll last me years. So will we." When spring came in full, they turned the bunkhouse into a space with clean walls and fresh bedding. By midsummer, they'd hosted 3 travelers, and Celia kept a tin box with the coins they left behind. The wheat ripened gold and bent in the wind, and Abram built a new gate at the edge of the pasture. They never spoke again of the man who left her. There was no need. One evening, as fireflies blinked along the fence line and the fields rustled with life, Abram sat beside her on the porch, the sky washed lavender with dusk. "You happy?" he asked. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I didn't know I could be like this." He took her hand and kissed her knuckles one by one. They watched the stars come out, the silence around them not empty but full of everything they'd built. And in that quiet, with the land breathing around them and the house behind them warm and steady, they knew they'd arrived not at the end of a journey, but at the beginning of the life they'd chosen together.